Hi folks, in this tutorial we'll be looking at painting green industrial bases, chocked full of grime and dirt, perfect for your sci-fi miniatures. So, without any further ado, let's cue the music. To start out, I'll be stippling some black leather from scale 75 over a black primed base. Now the black leather is very similar in tone to charred brown from Vallejo or Rhinox hide from Games Workshop. And the reason that I am stippling this colour is it allows for a little bit of texture to be created, but it will also leave the black primer into the recesses, creating a nice shadowed tone. The technique of stippling is very similar to dry brushing, where you get rid of most of the paint from your brush, but rather than going backwards and forwards across the model, you'll be doing more of a stabbing motion onto the flat surfaces to transfer the paint from the brush to the miniature. The trick with stippling is to slowly build up the colour. Don't be too worried if you don't get the colour you want on the first pass. Use the soft stabbing motion to build up the colour until you're happy with the coverage over the primer. Next, we'll be coming in with some Castellan Green from Games Workshop, and just like the previous step, we'll be using a stippling motion to build up the colour. We'll be focusing on the flat floor panels of this industrial base, leaving all the electronic components in the brown from the previous step. And with this green, we are not looking for total coverage on these flat panels. We want to cover maybe 70-80% of the area, and then slowly build up the colour, and we can have nice patchy green to brown finish on this. Doing 2 to 3 thin coats of this stippling effect will give you a really nice transition between the original brown colour and this dark green colour, which really aids to that grimy feel. Next, we'll be coming in with some Elysian Green to start adding some highlights into this green colour. And how strong you go with this is entirely up to you, but I have done a couple of layers on this just to really start giving it to that bright green areas as if it's been worn down in places to leave a dark and dingy feel below, but if it was once a nice vibrant green colour. After a couple of passes with the Elysian Green, the flat panels should look something like this. As an optional step on the green, you can use a little bit of Ogryn Camo to pick out some of the corners and some of the edges to give a more faded look to the green panels. Next, I'll be using some Agrax Earthshade to define the separations and details between the floor panels. And to do this, I'll be using a thin brush and carefully running it as a pin wash into the recessed details and the areas between the panels. I'll be also using it to pick out the rivet heads. Whilst the Agrax Earthshade is drying, you may want to take this opportunity to go back in with your dark brown paint and cover up any mistakes or overbrushing that you will have made with the stippling of the green colours. With the green panels done, we are then going to move on to adding some rust textures and colouring onto the mechanical sections of this base. For this, I'm going once again back to the stippling motion, and I'm using brown leather from scale 75. If you don't have this colour, that's absolutely fine. Mornfang brown is a really good alternative for this colour. To really enhance those rust colours, I will do a little bit of stippling with orange leather from scale 75. This is a very similar colour to Scrag Brown from Games Workshop, and with this I'm just looking to pick out a few corners and a few details, just to show some really aged rust colouring. Next, I'll be adding some chips and scratches onto the green floor panel sections of this base. To do this, I've taken a torn piece of sponge, dipped it into the brown leather paint from our first step, and got rid of most of the excess on a paper towel. I will then be focusing on corners and edges and dabbing the foam lightly onto the base to simulate wear and tear through chips and scratches. This is a technique where I would really recommend doing a little bit, having a look at it, and come back and adding more if you like the look of the effect. It's very easy to go overboard with this effect, and often less is more. To really help the chips and scratches stand out, I'm coming in with a second layer using brown leather from scale 75. Next, I'm going to come in with some heavily thinned Ushabti bone from Games Workshop and start doing some light chips and scratches onto the edges and the corners. And to do this, I'm doing some slight lines and some slight dots very carefully at random intervals along the sharpest edges of the base. And I'm also using this to go around some of the sponged areas that I have done with the brown paint, leaving a rough and uneven finished look behind. Just like the sponge chipping, this is a step that I would really recommend of doing less rather than more to really sell the effect. With the Ushabti bone highlights now complete, the base should look something like this. Next, to sell the idea that some of the rusted metal is still clean metal, I am sponging on some Stormhost silver from Games Workshop over onto the rusted metal areas. This is going to add a little bit of shine, but doesn't take away from the fact that this is heavily corroded metals. The last step is to use some Vallejo model colour black and to paint the rim of the base. I have chosen black as it is a nice neutral colour which doesn't distract the viewer's attention and allows all the colours and effects to pop out on the surface of the base. And with that, this green, grimy industrial base is now complete. If you haven't already, why not consider subscribing? It's free of charge and you'll get further tutorials just like this one in your YouTube feed. Thanks for watching, folks.